Hello everyone, MasterZeno1001 here, and in this video I want to go over some of the things that are new to this version of HardOps 986_12, which we're coining as Mercury X. This one still is part of the Mercury line, but it's just another incremental update that brings a few new things to the table on the road to 987. For example, Unify, Evict, and Sync has now a new addition called Collect, which has promoted this tool to now be called Manage. As a result, it should make the workflow a lot easier and even open the door for a new tool that I aim for in the future called Assist. Also, we improved Array, and the whole purpose of this video is also to remind users that we are currently working with 2.83 and 2.9, even though 2.9 is a bit of a bucking bronco right now. We aim to keep our products working consistently across both platforms for as long as is possible without divergence. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. So most of the things that I'll be going over will be things that are new additions. However, near the end, I'll be talking about things that are just some of the things that's happened over the last couple of updates that you may have missed or wasn't mentioned, but we are still continuing on our path of getting HardOps to that next level. So previously in HardOps, we added a utility called Unify to help manage scenes. So this situation won't ever come up for you generally where you have a bunch of objects and cutters in the same scene, but originally you would be able to select everything and then use something called Unify under left mouse click, which would bring everything together. And then to get rid of the cutters, we actually came up with something else called Evict, which we can go to under Control, which will remove the unrenderable items that are just not needed from the scene and place them into Cutters collection. So to top it off, we also added something called Sync, which if we select everything and we shift click, it will make sure that all the modifiers that we see in the viewport are the exact same way when it comes to render, as well as their children. But new to this version, we added a new utility called Collect. So I'll hide the floor just because I don't want the floor for this next part of the example, and we'll select everything, and under settings we're just going to alt click, and this will do something called Collect. If I press F9, we actually can bring this up, and this is a F9 window that will allow us to name the collection that just created, and the collection will filter out all the lights and cameras and empties and things that are irrelevant for rendering and actually name it after the file at hand, which in this case is called QBox206, but we'll just call this Boxy. And you can also set it up to link the asset back into the scene if you want to use it a second time, but you can also make it save not only the rendered assets, but you can also make it save light rigs if you're wanting to save and reuse light rigs via collection linking, but more on that another time. So we'll just click and we're done. So I will just press Ctrl S and save this file. So now with our new scene, we'll just press X and delete this cube, and just press Q and go under our asset loader, and we have the asset loader now supporting PowerLink. So I will just load in the Boxy collection, and we see that it brought in the box without any extra garbage aside from these dependencies. These dependencies aren't actually needed, so we'll press X and delete that, and this is actually the intended result. So now we are able to reuse assets easily just by collecting them and then linking them into future scenes, which was the aim of Collect in the latest update of HardOps. Blank light is a bit of a darling in HardOps. While originally it was made to light cubes, I definitely have bigger ambitions for it. New to this version of HardOps is the ability to opt in to have your blank lights be constrained. Originally when blank light was made, there was no track 2 constraint, and that was because it wasn't intended to be pointed at cubes the whole time. I aimed for it to be used in more environmental settings. So by having this turned off, you're able to freely position lights after you get a rig that you like. So in this case, I actually have a rig that I like, but if I wanted to experiment with the lighting setup, I could press Alt V, and then under blank light, if we look at the tooltip, Control will allow us to do a non-destructive scroll, which will keep the position of the lights, but allow us to scroll through alternative possibilities. And so this is just one of the fun ways I like to spend my time, just kind of enjoying a model or a collection of models just put together, just scrolling through light setups to just see what could be. There's also additional hotkeys, of course, like pressing C to change the color. You can adjust the saturation as well via hotkey. But also new to this version, you can save a configuration. So let's actually right click and we can reset back to where we started. But if I were to press Alt V and we control click, we're starting in a non-destructive state. So I'm gonna actually press Shift S, and you see that there's a save dialog on screen where we can actually type in a name. Like, for example, we can type in, we'll call this ENV test 1 because that's the name of the file, and I'll press enter, and that file's been saved. So if I just start scrubbing through these setups, I can actually choose a completely different setup, getting rid of my previous setup, maybe press Alt V and just completely start scrolling through it without even using non-destructive, which basically positions the lights very badly. But if I were to right click, I can go back to where I started because I should have held Control to replace those lights. But if I want to restore this back to default, I can press Alt V, Control click to keep this particular configuration. And if I were to press J, we can actually jump back to the initial configuration that we started with, allowing us to non-destructively play with our light configuration. Previous iterations of blank light were a little bit more random, with there being a to-do for me to get in and begin discussing how to make it a little bit more focused for my needs. If we press Alt V and we go into blank light, you can see that there's been some changes to the amount of lights that show up, to the type of lights that show up. For example, we're no longer getting like four suns like Alderon. We're no longer getting point lights everywhere, but you can press E to actually toggle what type of lights show up in your configuration. For example, now I have area points, and 2 suns, which can get an interesting result, but I can also press E again to change it over to just be area alone, and then just scrub through just different area setups without having to worry about some strange light popping up. I can also press E again to change it to sun area, where we now have something a little more robust, but also some interesting lights coming from different angles. And of course, during this, I'm able to move the mouse to just get that perfect lighting configuration. So for this next segment, before I exit this file and we jump to a clean file, what I want to do is actually first hide the floor so it doesn't end up in this collection I aim to create. We'll just select everything, and under settings, we're just going to alt-click manage in order to collect everything into a collection named the same thing as this file. And I don't have to even bring up the F9 or do anything because I know that it did that in the background. If we Control S, save the file, we can make a new file, and we'll just go here, and the first thing I'll do is just bring up the asset loader, and we'll just jump to box 204 and just bring in our Q box, and I'll delete the dependencies because they're just not needed. But we'll press Q and we go under our asset loader again, and I'm going to look for PL room 1, and we're just going to bring in an entire room from another file, and we'll remove its dependencies as well because they're just not needed for this example. And we're just going to place this down on the ground level. I just figured it'd be nice to power link the box that we're about to begin playing with rendering on. So I'm looking at this from front view, and if we jump over to look dev, this is what our scene looks like right now. Everything will slowly come to life, but we see that there's already some lighting going on. So I'm going to press Alt VV, and we're just going to press C and just turn all the lights off. So there's nothing going on here. And we see that the only light that we have is just the scene itself. So what I'll do is press Alt V, and we'll just roll through some blank lights. And you can see that blank lights now comes in at the 3D cursor. So we will just place our 3D cursor here, and we'll press Alt VB and just roll through some blank lights, just grabbing some areas. And because they're not constrained, due to them not being opted into under the opt-ins here, I can just press Alt-G, Alt-R, and we can just place this light and scale it. I've actually been pretty loose with my experimentations with this. We'll place another one here and just reset it. And basically, if you duplicate these lights or place them elsewhere in the scene, you can also have those be part of the blank light rig that is being scrolled through. So we're just setting up some lights, nothing complicated. And this scene is just a scene I made cutting cubes, so nothing serious there either. We'll bring this one in and actually take it to the back about here, and we'll go back into perspective, and this is our scene lit just with lights and no environment. So now if we press Alt V and we control click blank light, we're now scrolling through replacements of the lights that we have placed here. So basically, if you just duplicate your lights or place them in very specific places, you can just scroll through just random iterations of these lights, just kind of giving you very interesting results. And so I love doing this and just posting on Twitter, just showing just kind of random possibilities of what a room could be, just scrolling through it. And sometimes you find something that you just love and just have to take with you. Like this one just keeps coming back up on me. So I may want to press Alt V, control click this to jump into a replacive mode, and we'll press Shift S to save this, and we'll just save this as quick light. So we just have this quick light. We could press J and we could recall the environment test from earlier. We could scroll back to quick light and just begin accruing these rigs. If you're interested in where your rigs are being saved, you can look into your HardOps preferences, and similar to the Bevel profiles, which we also began experimenting with exporting data for and recalling, we're also doing the same for light. So this is just kind of a theme right now that I just want to experiment with as far as seeing what we can save and recall and what we can do with such data and what it can turn into. Also, in lieu of the new pop-up for saving light configurations, if you were to just press Q and go under settings, and you're using PowerSave, in the latest version, control clicking will take you into a save prompt where we can just type in something like Q room demo, and we press enter, and it will use PowerSave to save that as your scene. I promise this whole video isn't all about lights, but if we press Alt V and we control click on blank light, we're looking at it in what's called the fast UI. But if we press tab, it will take us into the expansive UI where we can move the UI around, and we can even pop up a handy little help window that we can scale up and click on to use the hotkeys of, similar to the Array V1. If we bring up lights though, lights brings up its own panel where if you click on world, you can add a world fog. But if you click on light rig, it will actually allow you to make configuration changes to the light rig, and clicking on configurations will actually allow you to recall configurations that you have stored. So if you're wanting to actually, scroll through a list of them, you can do that through the expanded mode of the light system. However, it still is considered a work in progress. So if we go back to light rig itself, we're actually looking at the light rig. I actually want to change this back to the proper one, then go to light rig. We can scroll over light types in order to change what types of light they are. For example, I'm changing these to suns now. You could also click on these circles to change them into X's and actually isolate lights one by one in order to configure them for your scene. So there's a lot more to blank lights that still is aimed to be achieved with this. However, I just want to just give you kind of a cursory look at what you can expect when you go into the expanded mode of lights. So one of my favorite workflows in HardOps is just, doing a cut and then selecting the area and pressing QOT to turn it into a shape. So through the F9 menu, you can actually turn a selection into a myriad of shapes. So right now it's changed into a cube, which has it looking a lot like a slice. But if we change this to a cylinder, you can see that the cylinder is fitting the area, but it's actually skewed rather badly. And so no one in their right mind would actually want this sort of result. So some improvements have been made where now users can choose to equalize the radius of their shape. And so by doing so, you can actually have your cylinder come in exactly as you would want it whenever you convert something to a shape. So we'll change this over to destructive and we'll try it again. So we'll select this shape and this shape, QOT, and we have converted it into a cylinder. And to just top it off, we will try it one more time in this area. Select these two faces and QOT. Array V2 has also seen some improvements. I will just join all these objects together, and if we go into Array V2, you can see that I'm able to press X to just change the axis over and over. However, if I stop the operation and I press Q and I go into Array again, it will resume from the axis that I last left off on, which previously this was not happening. It was just resetting it over and over and was getting a little bit irritating. So I'm happy to announce that that's finally been resolved. Bool Scroll remains one of my favorite additions to HardOps. It allows you to press Q and just click on Mod Bool Scroll to just scroll through and locate the bool that you want. So let's say I have this bool and I want to grab an additional bool. So if I go into Mod Scroll again, you can see that I'm re-scrolling through the booleans a second time. So I would have to press A to keep that one, and then I could scroll and then click, and I have both the booleans that I want. But if I were to go into shape and I were to Mod Scroll again, through the booleans, you can see that I'm not able to additively get these bools as I would need them. So that's fine for something like this, which is just two booleans. But if I were dealing with something a little more complex like this shape, then it would get a little bit more problematic. So for that reason, users can opt into the experimental additive bool scroll, which will allow you to basically additively use bool scroll. So here we have our piece, we select it again, we could scroll again, find the next piece we want, we could select it again, and just keep adding up the bools that we want without having the scroll actually reset the visibility of the collection. So this can come in handy for situations where you're just really needing to get access to a very particular bool, but you're also wanting to leave previous bools still enabled in their visibility on the screen for whatever reason. While I've personally tried my best to move on to Eevee, blank material has now been expanded to allow support for the bevel shader for those who are using cycles. So if we change our engine over to cycles and we select everything with something actively selected, we'll press Alt-M and just add a blank material. And through our F9 panel, we now see that there's an option for a bevel shader, which will put a bevel shader on the mesh, meaning that whenever we go into cycles, we'll be able to see this with a nice little bevel on the edges. However, the environment is just destroyed. So, how would I fix that? I would press Alt-VV and then just find the environment I want, press R to turn on to render, and now the render has been set to the state that I'm looking at in LookDev, and we can now look at this with a bevel shader in place. In fact, at the speed that it's rendering, I don't even know if this is using my GPU right now. So lately I've been working on a laptop where I don't have access to a numpad, and as a result it made me realize that view alignment is still a battle that needs to be fought and won, and we need to do something about it. So to show view align in action, I guess it's best to start off showing where it's located. So if you press Q, in object mode, view align is the shift or control click behavior of reset axis or flatten. However, you can also access it in the Alt-V menu under align view. In addition to that, it's also right here at the top of the 3D view where you can just immediately jump into it and just start scrolling through your alignment. In object mode, with just an object selected, is kind of boring, but this thing was born for edit mode. So I'm just going to bevel this edge, and we're just going to go in and just alt click on flatten align to just align to this. And I could press Alt W and just jump into box cutter and just begin performing some box cuts. We'll press spacebar to apply, and also we'll turn on align to view so that way we can draw perfectly flat with view alignment instead of being constrained to the surface. So we have our shape here, and we'll bring it in. And I lost my alignment by rotating, so I'm just going to select this face, and we will just alt click view align to realign our view to this. Rolling the wheel will allow us to jump through our view. And the reason I align my view back to this is that I want to select this edge And actually, instead of grabbing this edge and snapping a cursor to it, we're just going to press Alt X and jump into mirror. And I'm going to hold Control and scroll to Mod Apply, which is basically, it creates a mirror modifier and applies it. However, I also want to press V to change this to view. And while looking at it from this particular view alignment, we can actually mirror this over to the other side. So while we're looking at this from a very strange view, we can also mirror just as easily. So view alignment has allowed me to create some rather interesting shapes recently, just through the capabilities of being able to just mirror and work in views and return to views. So let's say that I actually like this view. I will just shift click, flatten a line, and we will just press E to create an empty. And now that this empty is created, I actually have a return point. So let's say we wanted to orient ourselves to this face. I can select this face, shift click, and we're aligned to this. And as you can see, all the hotkeys right now that are not default left mouse click will actually jump you into this. So if you're having any issues with alt click due to enable left mouse click, you should be able to jump into this tool still without any issue. However, I also had it made in a way where it could be mapped to be a hotkey. So if we press Alt V in object mode, we can go under Align View, and if we right click, you can see that you can assign a shortcut. So I've actually been contemplating what type of shortcut would be good for a laptop user to use such a thing, because this is definitely one of those things that you're just going to want to jump into all the time and align your view, because view alignment is just one of those battles that's just, back in the day, you used to be able to hold Control and Alt or Alt and Shift or something and roll the wheel. And so finding that that was missing in 2.9 made me really realize that we should just get in there and deal with it. So let's actually orient our view back to this area. So we're looking at it just from top view. We can actually look at it from any vantage point that's needed. In fact, you could press 9 to just flip the view and look at it from the opposite view. So now that we're looking at it from here, I can just go back into Ngon, get in here and just do my view align related business without any sort of issue with having to worry about getting that view just right. In fact, I do want to also pursue this on the box cutter side and expand it via having some sort of utility shape that doesn't actually perform a cut, but assists with alignment itself. So I'm still, contemplating the idea, but now we have our view align. I can just press Alt V, and I'm still under view, and I'm still under mod and apply, and I want to keep this side. So whenever I click the mirror, it will just mirror it to the other side. And if we look at this from front view, we can see that we've been working at this very strange angle this whole time. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. For example, I could just press Alt V, go back to Align View, and if I hold Shift and scroll, I can roll the view, I can dolly the view, and all sorts of things, even orbit the view by holding Alt and scrolling. But by holding Control Shift, I can actually jump to empties and even the target itself for adjusting my orientation. So now I'm rolling through the views of alignment that are based off of this empty versus holding Control Shift, scrolling back to the object and actually looking at angles of alignment related to the object itself. So I definitely have plans to expand upon this much further in the future, or much more further in the future. In fact, I think there could be some sort of raycasting active tool alignment system that could be done that could streamline all of this to take even less clicks and rolling and just really get you in the right view, or by drawing a line, assisting with getting the view aligned. There's all sorts of different angles I see that could be used for helping users get the view just right, for them to do the right cut exactly where they need to cut it. In preparation of the video that I see coming in the future where I'll be talking about the mirror and how to use it, if we select our object and press Alt X, we jump into the mirror. Some of the improvements that we've made towards mirror over the last release is the addition of the help panel. Before that, we also added notification text so that if you change the alignment, you would get a notification display on screen letting you know, so that way it would be a little bit more intuitive to the user. However, I also worked a lot on the help to make it as informative as possible, to try to display as much information to the user to let them know what's going on, so that they are aware that no empty will be created, what the mirror is going to be doing, what alignment is set to, and everything that's associated with their current system. In fact, the most important thing to know is that pressing X will reset your mirror. By pressing X, we can reset this back to default modifier with a new modifier for mirror, because there's not one present. And right now we're actually in advanced mode. And what this means is if you press D, you have all of the options associated with mirror and changing things about the mode of mirror, its orientation or its pivot point. But if we turn this off, we're in something called simple mode, where if we press D, we actually have only the options associated with mirror. So it simplifies the mirror a little bit more for users who are just getting into it and just need to use the mirror for basic tasks. However, if you're a more technical user trying to get very special situations, just know that under advanced, we have a plethora of options for you to use at your disposal for getting the absolute right mirror based on whatever orientation you're going for. But just know that orientation is not involving the cursor, will involve the creation of an empty, because that's the only way we can offset the origin of a mirror being done, differently than a standard mirror. But hopefully the new mirror will be something that users will be able to find themselves able to get more into and just get things mirrored a lot quicker without any further issues, because it really is the best version of mirror yet, allowing us to go in and set mirrors, disable mirrors. You can even add a completely different mirror by pressing A and just add a mirror on top of the mirror, which will give you a second mirror, allowing you to mirror in an even different way than you were previously using just one mirror modifier. So I do hope to go into it more in depth in the future, but I just wanted to do a small segment talking about how there has been improvements made towards the UI and the user experience of it to try to make it a little bit more intuitive. However, when it comes to mirror, there's a lot of mirroring that needs to be done, and so this tool aims to be the best tool for all those jobs. If you're using Sculpt mode, there's also been improvements there, ranging from pressing Q and being able to bring up a brush pop-up panel that lists all of the brushes for you to choose from, to also being able to see notification text for things like decimate. It will now display the ratio on screen. Whenever you toggle your brush, it'll now display information relative to that. If we press Alt W to bring up our top bar, using a little box cutter hack there, we can also expand the hops drop down, and there's options here for the same thing. So we can continue to decimate the mesh, we can toggle our mesh, and if we were to press Q and go under our sculpt options and mess around with voxelization by turning off Dyn Topo, you can also see that voxelization also has notification display, letting you know what's going on whenever you're in sculpt mode a lot. So last but not least, I would like to show that PizzaOps has been improved in HardOps, where now you can actually scroll through and go through a digital loader to choose what sort of pizza location you'd like to order. Insert location will actually bring you up to the Blender artist website. However, now the PizzaOps is more customizable than ever, with users able to add their own locations and thumbnails to scroll through and choose whenever you need to get some nourishment during your big 3D projects.